Hello, and welcome to the Tangent Podcast with Emily and Aleksa. I'm Aleksa, and we are so excited to have you with us today. And today's episode, we will actually be sharing a little bit more about ourselves and the little but big things that lead you to actually listening to us today. So, Emily, I don't know if you can remember, but do you think you can recount maybe the first time we met?
Aleksa, the exact moment we met is a little fuzzy for me. I'm sure it was polite and wonderful and consumed by the chaos of the first days of university. But what I don't remember in terms of what happened that day, I clearly remember in the way Aleksa made me feel. Aleksa's one of those people you can't help but be the best version of yourself when you're in their company. In class and through our friendship, I always felt challenged and encouraged to grow beside Aleksa. A little memory was in the first few days of class, I admired the way Aleksa could write on a vertical whiteboard and thought, no, I should improve myself and my whiteboard writing. So I went home and practiced. That's the kind of person Aleksa inspires other people to be, the best version of themselves. So when I was sitting in the departure terminal to go home for the holidays and started writing down podcast episode ideas in my journal, I could not imagine a better co-host than Aleksa.
Emily, you are so sweet. And that was one of the things that always struck me about you was that you're just so kind. And our math cohort actually started out quite big. And I remember Emily came to the second day of classes, and so I didn't meet her in the first day. And I remember thinking, wow, this is someone who's really passionate about maths. And you'll see when Emily shares her story, but I thought it was really weird that she wasn't in the math classroom from day one. And I'm always inspired by how creative she is. And she asks the most interesting questions that I would never consider to ask. But, when she told me that she was interested in starting a podcast, I was not surprised in the least because I always love listening to her tangents, pun intended. But when she asked me to be a co-host, I was through the roof excited because I was so honored that she thought of me. And this podcast has actually been in the works for about a year now. We hit a bit of a snag trying to figure out remote recording because we're always traveling, and editing takes a lot longer than we thought. And so this is actually our second time recording this episode, about a year, 12 months away from each other. And we are both just so excited to see where it takes us. And this episode is to help you understand us and our backstories a bit more so that you can get to know the people that you are listening to. So, Emily, why don't you start with sharing how you ended up in maths education and the people who inspired you along the way?
Thank you, Aleksa. To me, maths has always been a subject that's been made by the people in the classrooms or the people who are discussing maths. I've always enjoyed maths, and especially at school, and I feel really, really lucky that I had so many positive teachers in my life, so many positive figures in my life throughout my maths journey. Maths was never my plan, actually. Maths was also never my subject. I would have always described English to have been my subject, literature, poetry, that sort of thing. So I fully intended to become an English teacher, and I signed up to be in the English department, but day one felt wrong. Not in an uneasy way, but in the way that it did not feel quite right. So in the chaos of the first days, I met the head of the maths department at our university. And because maths, like I said, is built by the people in the field, I was just in awe of her demeanor and her character, and I instantly knew I wanted to be a part of that space. So I swiftly transferred to the maths department, and I've not really looked back since, and I'm glad it's led me to where I am. So Aleksa, how did you end up here?
Well, I knew that I wanted to be a teacher since I was about 10 years old. The question was always just what subject. And maths was actually not on my radar, similar to you, Emily. In primary, I remember being bottom set for maths. I hated making mistakes, so I stayed where I wasn't challenged by the math. I didn't want to have that opportunity to fail. And eventually my teacher caught on, and within a couple of weeks, she moved me straight to the extended group. And I think that's what made me really actually start to love math. And when I entered secondary, I'd already started to think about teaching maths as my subject, but I still wasn't entirely sure. I mean, I was just starting out. And Like I spoke about in the second episode, I did have some amazing math teachers. And one of my big inspirations was my sixth form math teacher, Mr. Hausham. And at this point, I had already decided on being a math teacher, but my interactions with him just solidified that decision. And it actually gave me the vision for the type of math teacher that I would like to be, that I aspire to be. And he would challenge us with these interesting questions, and he'd always get us working in pairs a lot. I mean, he loved a good competition, which worked surprisingly well for a class of four, 17-year-olds. But he also just formed this really strong relationship with us. And even after I left for university, he'd keep tabs on how I was doing and would offer support especially when I started my tutoring business. He is one of those teachers who just truly cares about the well-being of his students. And that's the kind of teacher that I strive to be. And one of my favorite memories with him in the classroom was there was this time where I forgot to write my name on one of our tests. And obviously, with it being a class of four people, he knew who didn't write their name, which is never what you want to, have. But I had also been asking him if he knew this song Complicated by the Indigo Girls. And it was a song that my mom loved. And so I was singing it in class one time, just under my breath. And he has said he'd never heard of the Indigo Girls. And he asked if that was my own, band or something. And he started calling me Indigo, which is not anything related to my name at all. And it was based on this one interaction that I had that he remembered. And so when my test didn't have a name on it, he gave it back to me and it had Indigo. He had written Indigo on it. And it was just one of those things where I think back and I smile. And it was a class where I don't always remember how well I did, but I remember how well I felt in the class. And there are many more teachers that I credit to my love of maths and teaching. And maybe someday we could even have them on a podcast. But I think for now, that's what I'll say about those who've inspired me.
Thank you for your story, Aleksa. And I know one day soon you're going to become your own version of Mr. Hausham. We have arrived, actually, should I say, at our brain break segment. In today's episode, we are going to be playing a little game of Would You Rather, so our audience can get to know us a little bit more. Aleksa and I are going to take turns asking one another Would You Rather questions, and then we're going to answer that same question ourselves. So I will start with the first question. Aleksa, would you rather always be 10 minutes late or 20 minutes early?
I would always rather be 20 minutes early. I think there's just stress that comes with running late and things like that. And I always, always, always have a book on me at all times. And if I'm 20 minutes early, that's 20 extra minutes of reading time. So for me, 20 minutes early actually is what I already do.
I completely agree, Aleksa. I have a thing about tardiness. It stresses me out.
I agree. The next question that I think is a tough one for me, would you rather be able to talk to land animals or aquatic animals?
Well, Aleksa, if it's a tough one for you, it's an easy one for me. I'd have to say land animals because I have a little bit of a fear of being in the ocean. Not that I don't love an ocean documentary, don't get me wrong. I love learning about the creatures of the ocean, but I'm very happy if somebody else is doing the videography for me. I feel very comfy on land, so I would love to be able to speak to all the dogs and cats of the world specifically, and then all the other cool animals on land, where my feet are dry. And how about yourself, Aleksa?
I think that I'm going to have to agree with land animals because I too have a fear of the ocean. But I'm thinking, if there's like a tank and there's fish, I'd love to hear what they see, and to be honest, I've never had a pet, so I haven't formed a relationship with a land animal where I want to know what they're thinking. I just feel like aquatic animals would just have such a cool outlook on life. But again, I don't know, and I'm scared of the ocean, so I won't go in to talk to them. So for that reason, I think I'll agree with land animals.
All right, I'm glad we're on the same page then, Aleksa. Would you rather read the book or watch the movie?
I pretty much will always say read the book. There are actually quite a few movies that I haven't watched because I have read the book and I've loved them, and I'm under the impression that the movie is never as good as the book. with very few exceptions.
Completely agree with your take, Aleksa. Always the book first. I also like that you can build your own idea and your own understanding of the world as you're reading, which is very nice.
I think what I'm realizing is that we are quite similar in a lot of ways, but let's ask one now about the math sort of side of things. So, Emily, would you rather convert decimals to fractions or fractions to decimals?
I feel like I have a very quick response to this, but I'm not sure of the reasoning why. I'd much prefer to convert fractions to decimals. That makes more logical sense in my brain. I love working with fractions, and then I'd convert to decimals at the end of a solution. So maybe that's the natural progression as you're doing maths itself. But what about yourself, Aleksa?
I was inclined to say fractions to decimals at the start, but now when I think about it, I think I would actually rather do decimals to fractions. This is one of the topics I taught recently, and I hated both of them, and I just could not get my head around it. But once you think about, if a decimal is 0.8, that as a fraction would be 8 over 10, and then you can simplify it. And I love simplifying fractions. So I think for that reason, I'd actually say decimals to fractions.
Well, then we finally disagreed on something.
Would you rather plot points on a grid or read coordinates?
Good question. I don't have an immediate response, actually. I think I'd rather read coordinates. I'm thinking of the applications of both of those in terms of maths content. And I love reading graphs and understanding graphs, so I guess that involves coordinates. What about yourself, Aleksa?
I really don't like reading graphs all that much. I feel like all of the different lines and stuff always confuses me. So I think I'd rather plot points on the grid because you go along the corridor, up the stairs, you find the point that you're looking for. And I enjoy watching the graph form more than I enjoy reading it.
Wonderful. Then you'll plot the points and I will read the graphs. Would you rather live in a cave or in a treehouse?
Definitely would rather live in a treehouse. Caves kind of creep me out a little bit. And I would rather have a beautiful view of the trees, and I love nature. I'd love to just be surrounded by that. So for sure, I'd pick the treehouse. But what about you, Emily?
Also very naturally to the treehouse. I don't think I'd survive a cave. I think there would be tears. I would be scared of accidentally spelunking. So treehouse it shall be. And you asked the next question. So treehouse it will be.
So for the final one, would you rather integrate or derive?
In terms of what's simple and satisfying, I enjoy deriving, especially through the context of functions. Although integration is also nice, in this case, I'm going to have to say derive. And yourself, Aleksa?
I agree. Deriving is really fun and really straightforward, but I think I really enjoy integrating, and I like the idea of integration and what you can do with it, especially when you get to integrating by parts and by substitution and things like that, where it gets really complicated, but in the end, it all works out. I really enjoy that side of math as well.
Well, thank you, Aleksa. We are also more than the maths that we enjoy. So we thought we'd share a little bit about who we are as people, because STEM fields have a way of encompassing people. And I think a lot of people working in STEM can sometimes tend to be viewed as nothing more than their love for a very specific thing that most other people can't fathom a love for. But people working in STEM are much more than our careers. And Aleksa and I felt it was really important that we took the time to share the other dimensions of ourselves with you all. So Aleksa, I'd love to welcome you to share these exciting, non-math related things about yourself with our listeners.
Thank you, Emily. I love this topic. I think it's one that's really important as well. Teachers are so much more than the subject that they teach. I always think it's interesting as well because when I tell people I'm a teacher, their first guess is always to think that I'm an English teacher. And when I say math, they oftentimes say that, oh, I wouldn't have guessed that you teach math. I think when you have an extended conversation with me, you might be able to figure that out. But it's just something I find interesting is that there seems to be that math teachers have a certain look. And I also hope that through our podcast and through this episode, you can see that your math teachers, they're not, cookie cutter, come from the same, that we are people that have different interests. And while I love maths and I can talk about it for hours, hence the podcast, there's so much more to my life than mathematics. Like I said, personally, I love nature. I enjoy going hiking so much. And there's just something so peaceful about being out in nature, listening to the sounds of intentional silence once you get out from the city. And I think that's also why I love the colors blue and green. Those are my favorite. As you could probably tell, I also love reading. It's probably one of my favorite things to do. This year, I've actually read 32 books already, so I'm on a great trajectory to be finishing 60 books this year. And it's a combination of mystery, YA, rom-coms, nonfictions. I read a lot of different things, and it's because reading just transports me to a different place. And as I said, I always have my Kindle on me at all times, just in case I want to read through a few pages rather than resulting to my phone and pulling it out. It's also better for me and helps me grow in my vocabulary, and reading just has so many benefits. And also, growing up in my family, it was a requirement that we had to learn an instrument. So we had to have an activity, an instrument, and a sport. And oftentimes in my family, we'd all play together our different instruments. So because of that, I love playing guitar. I love drums and singing whenever there's an instrument nearby. I love just picking it up and being able to play. And there's a lot more to me than just what I've said now, but given our time constraints, I think that if you were to spend a week with me, these would be the top things that you would notice about who I am as a person.
Well, thank you, Aleksa. And now if I were to think about what would happen if you spent a week with me, I think you'd probably hear about something or other that I'm learning about. I've always loved learning, and I think it may be the easiest way for me to start describing myself. I'm always learning about a new thing. And currently, I've been learning about the history and the present circumstances of the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Recently, I went on to learn all the locations of the countries of the world because I met a really nice person from Eritrea and I had to ask them where that was. And I thought, I really should have known. And for listeners who, like me, were not certain where Eritrea is, it's located in Africa, north of Ethiopia and east of Sudan. I also learned all the flags of the world, just in case that was relevant too. And to answer a more generic personality question, my favorite color is red because it was my grandmother's, and I really like pink too. And in what I find myself doing, I love digital design and making stickers for any occasion. I would not really call myself a collector of things, but I love collecting postcards that remind me of just how interesting and beautiful the world is. And just like Aleksa, I spend a lot of my time reading. I try to make sure that my bookshelf is filled with international authors so I can learn from multiple perspectives too. And like I've already mentioned, I love poetry. I think that is a bit for you to start getting to know me, but I'm sure loads of other noteworthy stories from both Aleksa and myself will pop up throughout our coming episodes.
I hope that we've given you a good starting point to get to know the people behind the Tangent podcast. And to end off today's episode, we want to share more clearly our goal of creating this podcast and why we are just so excited that you are tuning in with us.
One of the core goals of our podcast is to be a part of a positive and inclusive narrative when it comes to mathematics, to show you all, our listeners, the parts of maths that made us fall in love with the subject ourselves. We also wanted to build a community of people who share the same ideals as us, as we referenced in episode 1, that maths definitely needs a bit of a PR overhaul.
Yeah, and I think as well, if we're summarizing sort of who you are as a listener, our main goal is for people to listen and learn and to see the beauty of maths with us. We also hope that for educators, they can hopefully get some ideas on how they can make maths learning more interesting, how they can instill that love of mathematics within their own students. And also for students to help them to see the beauty of maths in everyday lives and to hopefully give a bit more grace to their teachers as well. So in this episode, we've shared a bit more about who we are beyond the maths and also how we got into maths education. I hope you really enjoyed getting to know us, and we are super excited to see you in 2 weeks' time with our next episode.